Okay, so today we're going to talk about tips for the STAR method interview. It's really a behavioral-based interview. So it's made up of obviously the S, the T, the A, and the R. So we're going to break those down and talk about them. So the S is really it's the situation, it's the background, it's setting the scene for them, giving them a little bit of information so they understand the rest of what you're going to share. The task is really all about what caused you to need to take action. Why did you feel like you needed to do something? What needed to be done and why? The action is, of course, the steps you took. This is going to be the really important part where you focus on you. And then the R, of course, is the result. You want to tell them how did this all end? It's really, you're going to go from the start of your story to the end of your story. And there's some pitfalls that come with these. And so I have a separate video where I talk about those. But today we're just going to talk about how to successfully deliver that STAR interview. So there are different types of behavioral questions, but most of you probably know what those feel like. I've mentioned planning. So think about, they may ask you a question about, give me an example of a time when you had to plan something, or you were in charge of it, or you maybe had to come up with a quick decision about something. So another example is customer orientation. You may be asked questions about how you deal with customers. So there's situations where they may say, a customer, they want things, in the moment, right now. That may not be convenient for you, but have you had that situation and how did you handle it? Then there may be other questions about things like decision making. When did you have a situation where you had to actually deal with a significant problem? So those are just the types of questions. People are going to say, tell me about a time when. They're going to say, give me an example of. And so the key here is, remember, don't be real vague and say, oh yeah, sometimes you need to say, oh yeah, there was a time when I had to do such and such. Make it specific. Talk about a specific scenario, because that's what they're looking for. Now this is going to be really important for you to create your stories, your examples, okay? I feel like you should have at least 3 examples for every skill that is needed for that job. If you can come up with 5, that's great. But I think you need at least 3. And I'm going to tell you that you want to have your best examples. You want to list those. And I'm going to recommend, too, that you put these in a grid format. And when I say that, I mean you can take a Word document, you could take an Excel document, but create a grid where you have your S, your T, your A, and R all across the top. On the left-hand side, put whatever your skill is. Let's just say your skill is planning. And then you're going to put under each one of those letters what you did, what applies to that. And I strongly suggest that you use bullets for that, because you're going to come up with little short phrases that you can actually refer to as you're interviewing. You don't want long narratives there because it's too much. You can't read that. You want to be able to glance at this during your interview, because these are your little reminders. But I strongly suggest you set up the grid form, and then for, let's say it is planning, have at least 3 examples. Start the next example, and then if you have more than that, that's fine. And then move on to the next skill, and it'll be a really good visual, and it's easy for you to see that. But you do want to make sure you have plenty of examples. Another reason I'm telling you to have at least 3 examples is you want your strongest ones first. You want some that are maybe related to your current job. One may be from a previous job. You always want to emphasize what you've done at your current company first, or the latest things that you've done. But you never know. You'll have a variety of those things. You may have some things you've done in your personal life, but they apply to the job, and you can use them as examples. So this gives you a good variety of things. Now, the time frame. This is really important. You want to keep it concise, and this isn't always easy because you're not sure about how much detail to share, but I really want to encourage you. Try to. It's really you really can't really share your example and do a good job of it, I don't think, in a minute. But you don't want to take more than a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to tell your story, okay? If you find that you're practicing and you're going on and on and on, this is your key that, okay, no, I've got to get rid of some of this. You really want to be concise. People want to know, hey, what was going on? How did you handle it? How did it turn out, okay? So be sure to try to keep it to, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes. Now, what's going to be really important is to emphasize your part in this. Talk about you. And a lot of people will say, I have trouble selling myself. Well, I'm telling you, for about 45 minutes, I'm going to need you to be real self-centered, okay? Because that's the way to win the job. You're just going to have to suck it up and do it, okay? And you also need to think about, it's really easy to sort of drift into my team did this or we did this. I'm going to give you some interesting facts. I also have a video that talks about the differences between literally how men and women interview and how they approach job searches. So, for example, women will tend to do this, and actually people of color will too. You tend to want to be more humble. You want to include other people. You want to talk about other people. Men don't necessarily feel that way. They've been taught to brag. They will take ownership whether it was really theirs or not. They have no qualms about doing that. And the reason I tell you this is I'm not being biased, it's just there's data that goes with this. But you really need to be conscious of that. You may have worked in a team, but what I want you to do is focus on what your part in that team was and talk about you. And again, you're going to have to do that. You can't shy away from it, because if you continue to talk about we and other people, you'll lose out because they won't really understand, okay, but what did Tina know? What did Tina do? They won't get that. So focus on positive outcomes. Of course you want to do that. You want to show yourself in your best light. But I am going to tell you this. There are going to be those negative-based questions. And one of the reasons that I tell you to have at least 3 examples, if not more, always be able to tell your story in a positive way and also in a negative way. And when I say negative, think about maybe that part of the project didn't go so well, or maybe you had a bump in the road. Always know that part of your story. Don't tell it if you don't have to, but if you're asked, you want to have those examples. But always be able to turn it around. What did I learn from it? How do we regroup? How do we resolve it? How do we get to a positive end? But you do have to, you've got to have those examples, because you will be asked those, and you don't want to be caught off guard. You don't want to think that, oh, well, no, I don't want to tell them anything negative about me. We all have bumps in the road, so it's fine. And they will understand that. What they want to know, how did you problem solve? How did you recover? Now, let's talk about the practice side of this. This is really important, and I'm going to tell you why. You can write down 1,000,000 examples, and you can have a list as long as your arm, okay? But you've got to be able to tell the story, and you have to be able to tell it convincingly. So the way to be able to do that is to practice, and you cannot just read it. You have to speak out loud. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. It may seem a little unorthodox. Make your family sit down and listen to you. You don't care whether they don't understand. Just tell them you don't care. Make them listen to you, because talking to someone in person really holds you accountable. It makes you conscientious. You're thinking about how you're droning on. You're thinking about whether this makes sense or not. Your family will even tell you, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but that part doesn't really make sense. If you don't have anyone that you can do that with, I suggest you stand in front of the mirror and go through your examples. Saying them out loud will help you clean it up. It will help you critique yourself and do it over and over. Last resort is your pet. Now, your pet's going to think that you just want to spend time with them and they're going to eat it up. But if you have to sit in front of the pet, sit in front of the pet. But I need you, my point here is just practice. You cannot practice enough. Know that story like the back of your hand and be able to tell it. And the more you repeat it out loud, the better you're going to get at it, and the more you're going to clean it up and make it concise. Now, you may not really think about this, but you want to connect your examples to the job. So you know the job you're applying for, you know what they're going to want you to do, you know what kind of skills you need for the job. So as you give your examples, find ways to connect what you just told them to what you know they want you to do. If you know that they want you to train people, then give them examples of that and say, hey, this is how I help people that were brand new to the company get started. If you know that's what they're looking for, always try to find a way to connect what you're doing to what they want. The other thing is you have to think about what type of job you're applying for. So there are jobs where if you're going to work in an art gallery, don't give all your examples and you never mention your love of art or your connection to art or what you know about art. You've got to focus on those things. Those are going to be the key words you want to make sure you're repeating to them. If the job is about you're going to manage blue collar workers or whatever, and you know what those workers do, mention that in your examples. And so my point here too is you may have your examples, and let's just say you're applying for multiple jobs. You still need to You've got to cater those answers to that company and what they're looking for. So don't forget to make that connection. Now I'm going to circle back to, I mentioned that I have a worksheet for you to use, and there's a couple of reasons for that. It'll help you track, what you're doing, but also this will be your journal. I want you to keep that grid. That's your, it's going to be your best friend because it's going to have your examples. I also want you to periodically keep that updated. If you go in there quarterly and look at your examples, and the reason I'm telling you that is because there's nothing like finding out there's a job you want to apply for and you're scrambling at the last minute to put things together. Prepare those things in advance. Add to them, make them better, but it's also your journal. It's your journal of your work history. So take advantage and use those. Interviewing is really hard enough. There's a lot of pressure, you get nervous, but the more you can prep ahead of time, the better. I always tell people at my job that if you're waiting until there's a posting or a job open, you're almost kind of waited too late. You're scrambling. So keep yourself prepared, because the other thing is you never know when those opportunities are going to pop up, and they actually pop up when you least expect them. So try that. Now, so share your star examples in the comments. I would love for you to do that. Tell me how this experience has been for you. And if there's anything that you've struggled with, let's help each other. Looking forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next video.